Angad, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jess. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I think it will be a very good chat. I was just saying before, last week we interviewed Matt Wood, who's the CTO at PwC, and he had spent 14, 15 years at AWS and has then come into the Big Four. You, on the other hand, spent 13, 14 years at Deloitte, made partner extremely young at 31. You were doing obviously a lot of transformation and strategy work at that time. And then you decided to leave that partnership for small business SaaS software in 2021, I think it was. Could you just step us through, I guess, why did you make that decision then? And if that decision was on your plate today, would you still make the same one?
Yeah, I think if we zoom out, so one maybe useful bit of information, I did study software engineering. I just never put it to use. And probably good for all the other people out there in the world. But I always had an interest in technology. And then it happened to be that professional services consulting was a great platform to be able to still apply that thinking to businesses. For me, how you could apply technology to change a business was the heart of the reason I really enjoyed technology. So, what would be my advice generally and why did I move? I think one, maybe reverse the question. Why did I stay? Because most people don't also stay for 13 odd years. And the answer was pretty simple. I kept learning. And any advice I gave to anyone that was at Deloitte at the time, or if they were in professional services today, it would be the same advice, which is I think it gives you a great platform.
Yeah.
You learn a lot. You have the privilege of being in rooms that you do not get access to if you are on other career paths. But it is a balance. Like it will teach you a lot and it will take a lot from you, transparently. But I loved it. And because that balance was always in my favor. Now, I think when I made the change, it wasn't because I stopped learning, but it was just that this opportunity provided a whole new level of challenge and learning that I couldn't get there. Most importantly, couldn't get there without moving halfway across the world. So that was a benefit. Xero was an iconic SaaS company trying to take on the world based in the Southern Hemisphere. When you start looking at opportunities, it's kind of like a sample size of one.
Yeah.
So when you get that opportunity, you say yes. So I was lucky enough to even have that opportunity. And so when I got it, I took it with both hands. And so if I was sitting in a firm today, I think it does really come back to what do you enjoy? There's no right or wrong answer to this, but I would probably still make the same move. And if anyone's like, but really in this world of SaaS today and all the doom and gloom of what could happen, I think only greater because you rarely get an opportunity to be at the helm of anything when so much change is happening. And so being here right now while the world is trying to work out what's next, that doesn't come very often. So this is a once in a lifetime moment. So I would do it all over again.
Yeah, the learning opportunity at a time like this is, wild wherever you are, but obviously if you do get that opportunity. And I think, yeah, I agree. I started in big law and obviously it does certainly take from you, but I think it's very hard even whether you're going in it to start your own business or a founder or you're going into a larger organization, that training ground of that exposure and that high performance and that velocity is very hard to go past. Would you tell your kids today to still do that? Or would you say start vibe coding and off you go?
Both. I don't think they're mutually exclusive because I think what do you get as a foundation in any, there's law, management consulting, could be investment banking. There's a range of these jobs where you just get exposure to a large set of industries. You get very good foundational training on how to think about problems, break down problems, your gut, and analyze data. I don't think those core capabilities are changing. A good engineer has those elements. That's why a lot of consulting firms hire engineers in the first place, And so I think whether you're going to build tech or work in a different industry, for me, it's more, does the job give you those fundamental core skills that I think are going to be critical, which I think it still does.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously you are operating in an insane time of change and there are opinions flying around everywhere. And I follow Harry Stebbings quite closely and he posted, I think it was last week now, that mid-level managers who can't figure out how to use agents are absolutely toast. They're out the door. They're irrelevant. And someone had come back in the comments, which certainly got a lot of support and said, and I'll quote, basically most companies run on fax machines and paper calendars. The VC class has no idea what normal looks like. America runs on bureaucracy, fear, and risk avoidance dressed up as due diligence. So when you hear that, who is right in your mind? And where do you sit on that fence?
So I think both could be right.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that both, I don't know who made the comment, but if you just take the VC world for starters generally,
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to live in a 5 to 10 year horizon. So inevitably they do look at things that sound unreasonable today always. That is literally their job.
The game.
And then you've got small business owners,
Mm-hmm.
people like yourself, founders, other people that are either trying to change an industry which might operate on fax machines. We do see that every day at Xero. And so you are living in the reality of today. And so, of course, both points of view are totally valid. The real question, which no one and anyone pretends they can, they're lying, but no one can work out is at what time frame are those two things going to intersect? Different technologies sometimes completely fizzle. Maybe that intersection never happens. I'm a strong believer this will intersect. The question is when and for who, because to your point, we talk to customers today, they're still on desktop software. Cloud has been around for 20 years.
Yeah.
They don't want to change.
Yeah.
By the way, they're probably just not going to change to cloud, and they're probably not going to go to AI either. They either will shut down their business, they will do something different, and they will evolve in a different capacity.
That's the really interesting thing, right? Is what happens. So for 20 years, obviously they've been able to use cloud. They're still sitting on desktop. It's a huge deal to think about a migration to the cloud. And it hasn't happened, it probably won't happen. Do you think that now, because the customer, the person paying the bills' expectation is changing, that choice becomes, as you say, shut down and do something different? It's a new era. Is that the reality, or is there a big enough market of customers going to these people who also just don't want to engage? Like, is that going to last? And what's your bet on for how long?
Yeah, so I think maybe we'll start with what are they doing, and then what's our bet. I think that there's definitely always a kind of matrix of these customers, right? And you would have seen, Takinder talks about this from a Xero perspective, but I think this applies generally. And you've heard more and more tech founders talk about this. People who want to build and people who don't want to build. And I think you will find that, yes, there will be a cohort of customers that either work with an accountable keeper or don't. They still work by themselves. We have plenty of them. They just want the software to do it for them. They have zero interest in building the next piece of technology. And others will say, hey, I actually do want to do something. Now, I think, and we can talk more about this, I think there's a difference between building the whole full stack platform and extensibility of the platform. I think what most people are doing now when they're building, whether they're vibe coding or whatever you want to call it, they're often building on top of a platform. If they're building on an LLM, it's still like there's a set of capabilities they're building on. And they're saying, hey, I've got this really super niche use case that I want to do. And it might be that niche, like 1,000 other people, 50,000 other people might see the same use case. But say, I really want to work hyper localized for me. Now, I think all platform businesses and smart platform businesses would say, yeah, like go for your life. And we would want to enable that. And you get the benefit of trust, scale, security, reliability to help you go do that for your very specific use case. I mean, cloud technology allowed this in a different way, but for the same transition, right? So you can, instead of like setting up my server and my rack and all, I get access to the cloud. And I can build software on top of that in the way that I want to. Xero as a platform has apps for a reason. Some days on there for a great reason, which is we do what we do really well. We've got a set of underlying data and use cases. And there's this emerging but growing need for better understanding your carbon footprint or how that works in a new accounting standard. We think that the fact that you can help go do that for someone that's really deep and ready to go adopt that new change means that our platform is working the way it should. It's extensible. Now, I think on top of that, someone might come along and say, I like some days reporting, but I'd like to tweak it in this very specific way for my workflow. And we would probably both say,
why would
go
you?
for it. Like, why would we stop you?
Yeah.
So I think that's even when we're talking about builders, I think today it is building on a platform with a set of capabilities to get localized and personalized. Very few have said, I've now built my full end-to-end tech stack of a CRM or a Workday equivalent HCM, et cetera, et cetera. It tends
Yeah.
to be I've done the thin layer or I've done a one-off. Works really good for me. Haven't yet accounted for maintenance code, data changing, all those good.
Security, everything else. How strong do you think this theory is that if businesses increasingly have access to the Claudes of the world, and obviously Xero and Anthropic have just announced their partnership, and you could argue, oh, well, business owners are going to go straight there. I think that's super naive. Obviously, they were just exporting from Xero and putting it in Claude anyway. So if they were doing that, they were doing that, right? But how strong do you think the theory is that actually, if more and more businesses get really used to going on to Claude and asking questions, and then they start to actually get quite frustrated that the inputs that are pulling from actually weren't that accurate, do you think there's actually a world where the jobs that we might have said are disappearing, like bookkeeping and accounting? The model has to change. I have no doubt about that. I don't think you can sit there and charge hourly rates. But do we actually just have all of these companies that were never using accountants before suddenly in Claude getting all these kind of useful information and then getting really pissed off that the data isn't actually accurate and then being like, oh, who's cleaning that up for me? Do I go and get one of them? How strong is that, or what am I missing?
I think it's highly likely potentially. And I think it will depend on how much they care about it. And I think, again, we think a lot about the segments of users in the market.
Yeah.
And their needs and their complexity. So
Mm.
the more simple you are, maybe a sole operator, you've got a handful of receipts you need to manage. You still have high income. That's not to say that's not true, but you would have a set of invoices. What you really care about day to day is maybe simpler than a business with employees. Actually, I hit a certain tax threshold.
Yeah.
I'm in a particular industry now, greater compliance needs.
I'm trying to grow.
I'm trying to grow. I have more employees, and your problem sets are very different. And so I think if you're a non-consumer today of any accounting software, sure, you might go look for a quick and easy answer to something. By the way, they probably already did that on Google.
Yeah, exactly.
So will they do it now on Claude? Potentially, or
Yep.
ChatGPT, or pick your other LLM?
Yep.
I think this goes back to the assumption that building software is a one-off event. So there is maintenance to it. And so same thing, you're going to ask a question, a year's time, you might feel really good about year one. In year two, when there's deferred taxes or there's different structures you set up on year one, thanks to great advice you might have got, has it lost that context? And now, again, the world doesn't stand still. So will these models evolve and be able to do a lot of these things? Obviously, memory is becoming more and more common in these models.
Yeah.
So those things might be true, but I do think that we've had self-lodgement of taxes for a long time in this country, in Australia. We still have one of the highest usages of accountants bookkeepers. I don't think automation of the pure task is the reason that you use an accountant bookkeeper. You look for broader things, advice, scenario planning. And I think that will continue. Just because you can get to the answer faster is a good thing. And we think for accountants and bookkeepers who are short on staff, unable to get great talent these days, they think about other careers, this helps them scale in a way that they weren't able to before. So we think, again, a net benefit probably for both of our customers.
Matt's advice when he was talking about this was sort of get the partners in the war room though, and figure out what is your model for this era. And you don't need to pull the trigger on that today necessarily. Things are still playing out, things are still happening, but look at what the risks are. Maybe we do see a percentage of clients that think they don't need this. Whether that's true or not, who cares? Because at the end of the day, do they pay your invoice or not? That's the question you have to answer. And if there is a significant risk that they don't, then what is your model going forward? What would you say as the top tip for any professional services firm, not even just accountants and bookkeepers and not just small business, but what would you say to people that are obviously going to need to look at their model? What's your top tip of what they should do in the next 30 days?
I would agree in the sense of, at a bare minimum, you should take a look at this trend and probably divide it into two buckets for you. One, which is of the customers we have today, what is going to evolve, how their needs going to evolve, and do we want to go participate? Does this trend also create more new customers that we haven't thought about before, that we haven't been able to serve before, and do we want to go?
Yeah. And do we want to is such a key question, right?
because you may not want to.
Yeah. It may not just be what you do. Maybe you don't want to become the vibe coding AI advisory practice of the year. Maybe you liked what you did. And so just don't run, just go and change approach, but use this as a chapter to do that.
And you may refocus and you may stop doing certain things and you may rechange the way you structure the business and therefore the economics to stay sustainable. There's a set of choices you will continue to make, to your
Mm,
point.
mm,
But I think you've got to be deliberate in your
mm,
choice. So you both can't be blind in that, like, the world's not changing and it's all going to stay the same. And equally, I'd say the reason to look at it from both of those lenses is risk and opportunity.
yeah.
So too easily, I think right now everyone is saying, so the world is changing.
Mm,
Where is the risk in my customer base today?
mm,
And the risk in that is you are missing the opportunity that
mm,
typically, if you're maybe a larger business, a business that's been around for a long time, you
mm.
have things that native new startups do not have.
Yeah. 100%.
And the risk is you ignore all of that because you kind of get caught up in all the new things you don't have, all the
Yeah.
challenges you have, but you probably have more customers,
Yeah.
probably have access to greater capital, you
Yeah.
probably have access to more people to be able to work on things, probably have runway to invest. And so how do you use those things to your advantage once you've picked the things you want to go compete in?
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. And maybe then this is a good opportunity to talk about sort of more broadly what's happening inside your organization as a leader, because you're asking exactly the same questions, right? Just at a very different scale through this period. So if you woke up tomorrow and you were the CEO of, say, a mid-market company, you've got a pretty cautious board. You got legacy systems everywhere. You're hearing all of the updates. You're reading your McKinsey article. The world's changing. Disruption's coming. There's so much opportunity. But you're sort of sitting there and you're like, I've heard this 100 times, but I just actually don't see anything changing. As the CEO, when you wake up and someone says to you, the chair's like, what's your 90-day plan, Angad? What are you doing? With all the context you have currently of the world and your experience, what are you doing in the first 90 days to make the right, well, what you think are the right decisions for this era?
Sure. I think, well, it sounds like a great wake up from a dream.
Yeah, like holiday.
Don't go to sleep again. I think, yeah, it's interesting. So what would I say? I say a few things that there are tried and tested models to try and address some of these things, right? There are probably two obvious ones, and obviously someone that's done strategy for a long time won't surprise you to say, like, okay, well, let's zoom out and go,
Yeah.
well, to the earlier conversation, what do we want to be in this new world? Because actually that's so important to start with.
Yeah.
Who are our customers? Who are we trying to serve?
Yeah.
And are we still trying to do that? And do we think that there's a genuine market opportunity to go after that?
Yeah.
If we do, then how do we have to think about where we change, who we serve today, who we need to serve in the future? And then, of course, how do we need to adapt our business to do that? Are we going to have to change what capabilities we have, but also what products and services we offer? Pricing model need to change. There's a long list you could go through.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the very logical, analytical approach of saying, like, okay, what's the world I've now woken up to, and where would my bets be, and how do I think about that? The other thing that's obviously critically important but often overlooked is the change management and getting people to execute.
Your actual people need to
Right.
make this
Because
up.
I could sit, and
Decks for days.
right, and I could get a bunch of smart people. I've got a board, great. So I'll have a lot of smart people around me that will help me think through that problem. That's good and helpful. The thing that's equally important is, are we going to execute on it? If we don't execute on it, it's all a bit of a waste of time. And so I think the really important thing of any company in any situation like this is your decision-making ability strong enough for this new change? Are you going to make the simple, no regret decisions fast enough?
Mm-hmm.
Get them done,
Mm-hmm.
get moving. Inevitably, there are decisions that are harder to make. So you will come up with this great bit of analysis and
Mm-hmm.
you will no doubt find a set of questions that you're like, just don't know the answer to that. We can go do more research and all these things, and we should. But I'm pretty confident, and I think businesses see this all the time. There are a set of obvious decisions today.
That still take an extraordinary amount of time to execute on.
Right. And so just make sure you keep doing that, because the worst thing you can do is put your business into flux. No
Yeah.
one knows what to do.
Yeah.
Everything's unclear.
Yeah.
You don't execute for today's strategy, you don't execute for tomorrow's strategy. You're in a bad position.
Yeah.
Ideally, you can go find the common reinforcing
Mm.
choices. So it's like,
Mm.
Will this happen or this happen? I'm not sure. But if we were to take decision one,
Mm-hmm.
would that probably likely, and that's why a lot of companies do scenario planning, is that likely to be a good choice regardless of these two very likely outcomes? If the answer is yes, you should probably start working on it.
How do you think about the workflows for this, right? So I know I used to be head of commercial and procurement in a listed company, and there's always some form of change going on. No doubt in my mind, this is bigger than anything we've grappled with. But a lot of the time, when you actually need people to execute, it comes down to relatively simple workflows that often don't work, right? Someone's got an idea, someone has a bet they'd like to make, then suddenly we need a business case for that. Someone needs to communicate with 3 or 4 other departments on that. Someone needs to actually make a call. Then someone needs to go through procurement and say, okay, well, we need to engage this, or we need to buy this software, or we need to do these things. And very, very quickly, you can go from like, this was a good bet that the handful of people that needed to make it want to make. And then 4 or 5 months later, we're still going through our systems and processes that were established, obviously, to manage governance and risk. But we're 4 or 5 months down the track, and maybe your bet has completely changed now because the world is changing within 4 or 5 months so significantly. How do you deal with that as the new CEO of the mid-market company? And what have you maybe done at Xero to streamline some of those very everyday processes we all battle, for lack of a better word, to get stuff done?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. Probably sounds like a very lived experience for many people and larger companies, to your point.
Mm.
I think there's a few things we try and do at Xero, and I think companies I've advised in the past, or, and I think Deloitte used to do the same thing, which is you tend to try and make sure you have a portfolio of bets. So there are some that require a huge amount of change. They might require a huge amount of capital and changes in the business that you're actually running. You probably want to be as clear as you can about them. They're going to
Mhm.
require you to move the ship,
Mhm.
but you want to know whether they're the core things you need to keep doing to be sustainable or competitive in the market you're in. Then you want to create an environment that fosters, whether you call them 10% bets, 20% bets, but they're bets. They are things that can happen. Your company will not die if you get them wrong. It could have an exponential outcome,
Mm.
but there is so much unknown. And
Mhm.
so you've got to try and give it a shot.
Mm.
You don't want to overcommit capital or resource,
Mm.
but you got to reduce the friction, to your point. And so I think you do want to find a way that you can allow.
Accelerate those 10-20% bets. What's an example of that? Is that like, I don't know, a department in marketing is like, if we were to buy X software, we could streamline XYZ, but it's going to cost us 100 grand a year. Should we do it? Like, is that the type of pool that you're talking about?
It could be one of those. It could be even bigger and exponential. I think for those ones that you just referenced there, yes, that's kind of like ticket to play, good BAU enhancement
Mm-hmm.
that I think as a leadership team, you're trying to create the environment to happen anyway. So what do we do at Xero? Make sure that as many people have access to the right new age tools that we think we can, so they can experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Give them the training.
Mm-hmm.
Create a framework, to your point, around procurement that is
Mm.
now adapted for this world.
Mm.
So something that is still getting core into our systems, that's going to hook into the core Xero product that could have huge implications for our customers. You don't change that procurement process overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Giving employees access to tools that can make them go faster
Mm.
and work more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
We worked very quickly with our risk and legal teams and
I was
procurement
going
teams.
to ask, how did you do this? Because everyone I talk to, especially in government, will say, yeah, we've got now 10 times the requests going through IT saying we want this, we want this, we want this. And maybe it's good, maybe it's not. We don't know. So we just become the bottleneck. How did you fix this?
Well, I think you're trying to do it from the top as a executive team, but also with your leaders.
Hmm?
And you're trying to say, like, what's the big no regret outcome here? Like the biggest, you're always weighing up upside and downside. So one, we're trying to make sure we still hold certain security standards. You're not just going to go procure the latest, greatest small thing.
Do
Right?
you have ISO? Do you have SOC 2? Done.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got to cross a certain standard.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, we make it very clear you do not put company data into it. So if you
Yep.
want to experiment, go for your life, but you're not going to be able to put any.
So you'll still let them have it, but it's just like, don't put all of this data in, please. And is that a super formal thing, or is that just a managers are enabled to say to their teams, this is logic. Do you have a policy on
So
that?
we brought it down, and all credit goes to our risk and legal teams and procurement teams to work, kind of collaboratively on this
Yeah.
with the direction. And I think it's down to like a 5-question form. So you want to procure new software,
Mhm.
these 5 questions, keep it really simple. If you hit no risk threshold, just go get it, and you have the budget to do so.
Of
But
course.
go do it.
Mhm.
If you hit a certain risk threshold, you might get asked 1 or 2 more questions, then
Mhm.
they'll work with you on that.
Mhm.
If it's any bigger than that, you might still go through the traditional procurement process. But the good thing for a user or an employee in that process is I know exactly what it looks like
Yeah.
coming in. I know
Yep.
how quick I'm going to get it. I have set SLAs. The team have set SLAs depending on this triage.
Mhm.
And so they feel pretty empowered.
Yeah. And there's momentum, right? Because I think one thing that we keep hearing a lot of with a lot of the organizations we work with, particularly in this kind of space, is like, well, we want to run and we want to empower people, but they have to go through the process. And it's like, yeah, but the process was designed pre-AI. So the process, whether you'd like to acknowledge this or not, it means that that person with the good idea that saw something that could have a really high ROI has to know who to ask, where to look on SharePoint, then go and talk to someone. Not sure if we need a full business case, not sure if I'm asking 5 questions, and then it's going to go into the black hole. And maybe someone in IT or my manager or someone will pop out in 2 months' time and say, I can use the software. But that just kills momentum, right? At a time where you're trying to say, what is the return of all of this? Because we genuinely don't know. And the best way for us to actually experiment is people closest to the work touching the tools. Would you say, if you think about things like this that you did where you pulled risk and legal in and said, let's sort this out, what were the sort of foundational work? Was there anything else outside of that example where you were just like, this is the foundational work where we need to grease the decision-making pipelines to be able to dream of executing on the opportunities ahead of us that you
I,
could share?
I think maybe the two, because it's something I was going to highlight, but I think it can be
Mm,
the same answer to your question. Like the
mm,
most important thing foundationally is like, can you empower great leaders to go do the work? So we agree the philosophy.
mhm,
We as an executive team didn't go design it.
mhm,
The leaders in that space came back. They're like,
mm,
this is how it can work.
mm.
Works so much better because they know what they're trying to mitigate for.
Yeah,
They are the experts. We are not.
yeah.
So they'll make sure we do the right thing. Equally, they understand what the outcome needs to look like. So
Mhm,
they have clarity in that. And then
mhm.
they're empowered to come up with the answer. We are not micromanaging. We didn't tell them it's got to be 5 questions. We didn't tell. It's just like, be quick, keep us safe. We
Yeah.
will not tolerate customer data or core, obviously, always secure and financial data at Xero to ever be at risk. Like if you've got those frameworks, go come back, give us a solution. And I'd say this applies to generally when you're trying to get things
Mm,
done and move at pace.
yeah.
So, the obvious question someone maybe listen to this is like, yeah, but do you have an infinite budget? How do you know it's like, again, we are empowering our leaders to make trade-offs.
Mm. Have
There's probably some software you used to use, maybe you don't use it as much anymore. Maybe there's some other things in your budget that you
mm,
are, okay, net, if I want to move faster, I'm
mhm.
incentivized to do so. And you're giving me the power to do that and you'll clear the roadblocks for me. Now I have incentive to go, these other 2 things, yeah, just kill them. I'll
Yep.
take the budget. I'll move it over here. I know you'll help me move fast. And so empowering them is critical.
It's just an entirely different game. And I think often, the leaders that you want in this environment are like yourself, like me leaving a slower listed company is this is a playground for us. It's a huge opportunity. How are we going to transform? What are we going to learn? It's like very personal in your career as much as it is the mission for the organization. And so if you are in an environment where you cannot run despite your best efforts, how do you keep your top talent in that environment as well? Was that a discussion for you guys as well of how do we actually identify these sort of power users or these people that are going to absolutely run here? Did you do anything different for them or you just literally just cleared the path and said run?
I think we definitely said we tested something. So, you don't open the floodgates to thousands of employees, your cost would go through the roof. But we did definitely say like clear the roof,
Mm-hmm.
clear the pathway,
Mm-hmm.
get them the tool, start with the pilot. We kind of have a pretty good sense of the cohorts of employees that would benefit the most,
Mm-hmm.
but also will more likely get usage out of it.
Yeah.
Then we see that usage and we go, you know what, this team is just going at it. Give them more licenses, get them
Scale.
onto it,
Scale.
just scale it.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then how do you scale it across the
Mm.
business? Because you know that the likelihood of the return is pretty strong.
Yeah, I was going to say, how disciplined do you think you are as a team at coming back after, say, a pilot period, and maybe it's not just about software, other bets as well, at coming back and saying, oh, well, we said this was the ROI, this is the basis of the decision, we've had the period of time now, let's come back together and say, was that actually realized? Is that something you've always been really good at, or sort of not done that much, which I think is largely the case across most of corporate Australia? Probably globally? Or is that now something that you're putting even more emphasis on because the learnings are just so much more valuable than probably what they've ever been before?
Yeah, I think we've always been pretty good at it,
Mm.
transparently. I think if you look at our leadership team, I think it's inherent in like how everyone likes to operate. Like, take
Yeah.
a bet. What do we learn from it?
Yeah.
And I think that word is important. What do we learn from it? So the risk that everyone has is if you try and put everything into a financial ROI business case, it's
Mm-hmm.
very hard and you would probably do very little. Some things you just got to be clear. We're doing X. We hope to learn Y.
Mm-hmm.
And if we see these signals,
Mm.
and we know we're heading in the right direction,
Yeah.
then we may create a more fulsome business case because we might invest more. So I think matching the level of investment to the effort you put into what you're trying to measure and the ROI you're trying to measure is critically important. For every, and obviously scale this dollar for a size of a company, but just say for every $500, if you're trying to build a 3-tab financial model ROI, like you're never going to get anywhere.
100%.
If for a multi-million dollar bet you do nothing, that's also not a good
Yeah.
decision. So I think matching the level of rigor and that you're trying to learn something. I think that's the key point. Sometimes it's financially clear.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's operational metrics.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's pure learning.
Yeah. And I think as well, what I've seen is where organizations just put in a bit of effort to helping those leaders articulate that, things can move a lot quicker because leadership and executive don't want to be blockers. But also, if you're just throwing a million noisy ideas into the mix every 5 minutes, which is obviously what it feels like at the moment in some cases, it's very hard then to go and stack rank that and go, well, which one should we pursue? What are you actually even hoping to learn? Like, 3 sentences in an email because you've seen something doesn't actually help people move particularly quickly on this. Have you noticed the, I guess, not noise, but how are you managing that sort of significant uptake in people saying, we should use Claude, no, we should use GPT, no, we should use Gemini, Copilot, shit, no, it's not, we should do this. Like, how are you navigating that as an organization?
Yeah, I think you can imagine, we use probably all of them to some
Yeah.
degree. But we're trying to be very deliberate about what's the use case and why. Is it genuinely stronger in some instances?
Mm-hmm.
I think models are evolving. So I think our job is, to your point of, do you come back to the ROI? You got to keep coming back to the what are we learning?
Yeah.
What will we change? So different tools, let's take something like Gemini. We use a lot of Google Workspace. It makes a lot of sense. It's embedded into our workflow for our employees. Someone will always tell you it's maybe not the best at X. It's like, but for the large majority who we're trying to scale it for, does it give them 80 to 90% of the benefit? If the answer is yes, which it is, then great, let's go. In some creative areas, we use OpenAI's models, ChatGPT. It seemed to work better at the start. Maybe we'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
Team's probably a better place to answer that, but it made sense. And so we restricted the amount we're spending on it, access to the people that need to use that model most. And then, of course, now with Claude, and it's deep bet on coding and at least all creating co-work. And workflow optimization means it's got a different use case. And so we just try and be very deliberate about that. And then you got to come back to it because everyone that counted out Gemini and Google 2 years ago, it's kind of like, oh.
Yeah.
And so this, I think, is that, in a time when the world changes so quickly, the last thing to, be humble because no one really knows.
And don't back it in too far. I think we were all now, I mean, the tides changed so much. And I think what I really liked is that point of, what is the actual benefits here, not just vibe, because we're all in vibe now. We're like GPT, it's nowhere near as good as Anthropic. We all adopt these waves, and no doubt in 3 months that could change again. So I've seen a lot, especially inside government organizations, it's conservative, of course, for very good reason. But there's been this sort of ambition to find consistency. Every agency, every department needs to just use the same thing, and then we'll see all these amazing use cases on top of the same thing because that feels really safe, right? You don't have to battle with all of these different things. But would you say that is from a from a corporate perspective, strategy perspective, would you say that's just the wrong ambition, trying to get this uniformity everywhere? Instead, it's just what is best for the job and sort out your procurement and your risk and your governance profiles to manage that effectively?
Yeah, I mean, having never worked in government, so
Mm,
I'd say this again with humility and a grain of salt. There's things that I probably don't know of why that's a good thing to do,
yeah,
right? So my answer is naturally going to be the latter, which is like pick the best tool for the job.
yeah,
100%, of course. But there's maybe good reasons, and I'm sure it's somewhere in the middle, which is in certain. And I think that's the same of anything we are building for our customers or we are procuring. Like
yeah,
there are certain things that you want standardized consistency and reliability for, and we would probably get frustrated if suddenly like three different answers are given to you because three people use three different processes or outcomes together. But there's areas where you just want them to get the best outcome. I really don't care about the input or the tool you use. Just give
yeah,
me the best outcome. And so I'm sure that's true in government. There's probably situations where we as citizens would not want them to just be randomly, iterating on things.
try it out. Yeah.
But there are probably others where it'd be like, hey, it'd be great if you just pushed a little bit more because us
Mm,
as citizens or end customers, we might get a better experience without having to wait
yeah.
3 or 4 years.
I actually realized that. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Here, a couple of weeks ago, maybe it was a few days ago, time at the moment is a little warped. But, I think it was the CEO at PwC came out and said, this hundreds of year partnership that if you're not on board with this stuff, like if you're not going to upskill, if you're not going to learn it, if you think it's all rot, like you probably don't have a place here. Comes to managing people, you got change management, and you've got a huge, huge shift that I think we can all have so much empathy for. How do you think about the upskilling approach, and what have you done to sort of train and bring people along on that journey? And what is your view on that cohort that inevitably all our organizations have? I posted about this today myself, talking to my dad on the weekend, where they do not want to engage. I mean, luckily for him, he's about to retire, so he can have his tantrum when he has to use a portal, and the world's not going to be different for him. But what do you say to sort of people that maybe have had the opportunity to upskill, however you've gone about that, and then are opting out? What's the reality looking like for that?
Yeah, I think that, well, if I just take our context, we don't really have many people opting out. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, there might be different levels of engagement. I think that's just always the case to your point. People are trying to understand where to start.
Mm,
What can you do with it? They're all logical questions.
mm.
And I think we're just lucky in the type of company you are, who
Yeah.
we hire, what we're trying to do. Of course, different in different industries. I think that, but if I go, if we were always to come full circle of why did
Mm,
you spend time at a professional services organization? I think there are always people that want to learn and push the boundaries. And I think that is always going to be the case.
yeah. Find them,
Find them
showcase them. Yeah.
and give them a reason to stay with you. There is inevitably over, the over century, the time
Mhm.
period that professional services has been around,
Mm,
PwC,
mm,
or are any others.
mm,
They've adapted. People adapted.
mm,
They have lasted for over 107 years for a reason.
mhm.
But it's because they managed to retain the people that were ready to adapt. They adapted and they adapted to what their clients needed.
Mm.
Inevitably, there is someone there that said, I wasn't going to change, and they left.
Yeah, 100%.
And
It's
that's
so
okay. I think you are going to have that. And I was talking about this more recently when someone had asked me about this change.
mm,
I
mm,
think the thing you've got to do as a leader, most importantly, is be clear about the direction. What do you want that change to look like? What is it going to look like? Why are you doing it?
mhm.
But most importantly, where are we heading?
Yeah,
So some people will look at a statement like that and say, well, it's just a bit of hot air. And are they really going to do it?
yeah,
Credit to them to be very deliberate. It's like the type of organization we want to now be for the next 5, 10 years is one that is thinking AI first. And so the thing it does do is it makes hopefully every other conversation very simple,
mm.
which is if someone's like, well, I just don't believe it, you're like, okay, well, you're also very
We're not gonna enjoy
capable
it.
and smart. Here's how we're going to work.
Yeah,
If you don't want to do it, that will be a part of a loss to us, but then also maybe you should find somewhere that does
really
work for you. And
select.
it's not trying to be like, oh, no, if you're not on the board, we're going to
Yeah,
get rid of you. It's more just saying like, this is where we're heading as a company.
it's just reality as well.
We think it's the best bet.
Yeah,
We may be wrong. You may
yeah,
be right. And there might be other companies that bet differently and you want to go work
yeah,
there and you want to take a bet on that. So I think the most important thing is being clear. And that's what we are trying to do with
yeah,
the organization, which is like, here's where we think the world is heading. We want to take these bets.
yeah.
And that's how we're going to operate.
Yeah. And give people the opportunity. And I spoke with Matt a bit about this as well. It's like we have a responsibility at leaders when new technology comes in. I can imagine I wasn't around for this, but back in the day where we're moving to a computer and we need to learn to type, I'm sure people like my father had their arms up in the air storming out in a huff. There's no doubt about it. But I feel like as leaders in this era, it's kind of like, trust me, and even if you disagree with this, even if you think we're doing this the wrong way and you walk out that door, almost in any other world, you are going to have to, or any other organization, like you are going to have to find your way in this. So giving people the skills or the opportunity to pick up those skills feels like something that should be getting a lot of emphasis right now.
Yeah. And I think that's comes back to something we were talking about before. Like, give them the tool, you give them the training.
Mm,
By the way, us doing this,
mm,
we're hopefully doing it in a way that you are more employable,
exactly.
you have greater success.
Yeah.
We will put in that training, energy, and support for everyone that's ready to come on the journey, right?
Yeah.
Because it's in our best interest, but actually also it's in their best interest.
And explain
Um,
well.
if that's where the world heads, because
Yep.
they have greater skills, they actually can meet the demands of what the workforce might look like in 5, 10 years.
Yep.
And we think that's a good thing.
Yeah, amazing. You've been so helpful. I just leave on the one last question. I think SaaS has been the first wave, I guess, of major disruption from everything from, software developers, obviously the first ones to feel that real insane change on what their day-to-day jobs are. We're seeing huge layoffs in that space for developers. You're in software. The markets are obviously being very interesting around that at the moment. So you've been first. For everyone who might be second, third, fourth, fifth in that flow, what have you learnt in the last maybe 6 months that you would think is the best little nugget to pass on to people who are in these coming waves?
Sure. I mean, and I think we should again kind of separate the facts and the kind of narrative on
For
SaaS
sure.
thing first, right? Because I think if you think about it, some firms are actually hiring more developers than they ever did before.
100%.
So, like all change, it doesn't come applied equally to every company at a given point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's what we're seeing now. Everyone, if you just have the word SaaS in your business model, you are lumped together and you're
Yep.
equally feeling the pain. But of course, business,
Mm-hmm.
including, by the way, a lot of these new AI companies that charge software as a service per user, per enterprise licensing,
You are also in the category.
you are also in the categories. Look, that's just how the market is. And
Mm-hmm.
what would be my tips? And yeah, if you've got a good strategy and a clear strategy, obviously stress test it, but find your no regret decisions and keep executing. You cannot afford for your whole company to
Yep.
whiplash on what the external market is saying on any given day. Go start finding those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
The risk in what you might need to do today to
Mhm.
continue to serve your customers as they are, but also those opportunities that help you go get ahead. What's that long list of things that you wish you could have done, but you couldn't because engineering talent was a constraint,
Expensive.
development talent was a constraint, access to that capital to hire enough people was a constraint. They're not necessarily the same constraints anymore. What more could you do? And then I would say 3, make sure you are creating a agile enough system for how to react to this, because even in wave 1, to your point, I think it's going to change dramatically. It has been every day for the last 6 months.
Are you okay, Angad? The exhaustion of that much change, but it's fascinating, I
It's
guess.
fascinating. And I think, but again, if you do 1 and 2, you know what you can stay true to and you continue to deliver for your customers. And I
Yeah.
think you will be in a good spot.
Yeah.
While you can go understand, okay, as the world's changing, what new opportunities do we have? I think it's a fascinating place, which is why I go back to what I still do today. Absolutely. No better time to be in this role or this time or in a company. And so I think just finishing on the third, making sure that you can find those ways to stay agile, because you are inherently going to make some choices. Some might be bad, some will be great. How do you double down on the great ones? How do you
Mhm.
quickly cut the bad decisions and then evolve as the world evolves around you quickly?
Yeah, 100%. Like learn from the decisions because they're going to be able to deliver you patterns and intelligence faster than they ever have. And I mean, we're a startup of 2.5 years and we are literally sitting there going back and saying, my gosh, what is possible to do now in the next 12 months was not possible to do 12 months ago. So we are a baby in the scheme of things, asking the same questions and resetting on the possibilities. And I think that's really good advice too of don't ride the hype waves. I see so many people on LinkedIn just defending this, jumping in this. It's like, okay, it's kind of fun to be a thought leader on some of this stuff, maybe, but actually, at the end of the day, the leadership in this period is around setting the direction and having the decision making pipelines in place and the ability to learn from those decisions quickly. And then it's actually just a fascinating, fascinating time to be a leader, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at any technological change that's come over the last 20,
Mm,
30, 40 years, it
mm,
wasn't that I don't believe it was the technology
mm.
was the thing that killed it. It was whether the company made decisions.
Yeah.
They won't get more as right, but the ability to make decisions
Yeah.
are the ones that adapted and moved forward. And to do that quickly is what matters.
Yeah, I could not agree more. This has been very, very helpful. Thank you so much for making the time and congrats on everything that you guys are doing. I think it'll be fascinating. I spend way too much of my time thinking about Xero like it's a Harvard Business Review case. I need better hobbies, but I think it is just so fascinating to watch. And it's been amazing getting to know so many of your team and sort of seeing a little bit of this from the inside. I think we'll see incredible shifts in the next few months. So well done to all of you. And thank you again for making the time.
Well, thanks for having me, Jess. To your point, I mean, thanks for being a customer. Thanks for being an app partner. It's evidence in, I think, just our overall strategy, which is how do we create the right platform? Great companies like you can come on that, build with us, and serve small business customers, which is ultimately why we do it every single day.
100%. No, you're Xero team, incredible people to work with. And I think at the end of the day, you can have all the tech that you want. You can have the smartest model in the world, but it's back to who are the people that are actually getting stuff done in this organization and what do those people like to deal with and how good are they at making these calls? And certainly my experience has been it's very, very hard to find a better team. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, Angad. Thanks for this.